This is chapter 2, and I am going to recite verses 183, part of 185 and 186. O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may guard against evil. And the part of verse 185 that I recited, its translation is, Allah desires ease for you, and He desires not hardship for you. And He desires that you should complete the number of days, and that you should exalt the greatness of Allah for having guided you, and that you may give thanks. In the next verse, and when my servants ask you about me, surely I am near. I answer the prayer of the suppliant when he calls on me. So they should hear my call and believe in me, that they may walk in the right path. I have recited
Which chapter and verse?
these verses from chapter 2 for this reason, that every year when it's time for Ramadan and time for Eid al-Fitr or time for Eid al-Adha, we have this argument about whether it's permitted to see the moon with permitted to use calculations, or you must see the moon with your own eyes, etc. And interestingly, this year, on Monday, I received an email from an Islamic organization which said that they generally follow the Saudi announcements, because Saudis announced these things after the moon had been viewed. And Ramadan is going to start on Wednesday. And I was puzzled how someone could see the moon on Monday for an email to be sent out to people to say that Ramadan is going to start on Wednesday. The whole confusion arises from two things. First of all, we are told that Sharia says this. Well, what does Sharia consist of? Sharia consists of, at the lowest level, pronouncements or rulings of jurists of days gone by. Now those gentlemen, great they were, and great service they did to the cause of Islam, but their pronouncements were necessarily restricted to the circumstances and the situation at the time and in the country that they followed themselves in. So they cannot necessarily bind us. At the top of the list is the Holy Quran, and the Holy Quran says nothing about sighting of the moon, how you should determine whether the moon has been sighted or not. And that leaves us with ahadith, the sayings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad about when to start Ramadan and when to finish Ramadan. And there are many, but in Bukhari, for example, there are three that I want to look at. And one of them says, when you see the moon, Ibn Umar said, when you see the moon, then start fasting, and when you see the moon, then end fasting. Now, the word used here is roya. And this is why we say royat halal, or sighting of the moon. And Roit is translated literally, see with your own eye. Then start fasting and then end fasting. But in effect, its significance is when you find out, when you have knowledge that a new moon has been born, then start fasting. And then when you have knowledge, when you attain knowledge. Because you see, in the Holy Quran, for example, in I think it is chapter 89, verse 6, God says, addressing the Holy Prophet and his companions, have you not seen the people of Ad? Now, it was impossible for the Holy Prophet to see the people of Ad because they had perished from this earth many hundreds of years ago. And again, I think it's perhaps somewhere in verse 2, chapter 2, I think it's perhaps verse, I forget the number of the verse now, chapter 3. God says something similar about Hazrat Ibrahim. And when God says, in many other places, see, it's using that word in terms of knowledge, find out. As I said, God says to the Holy Prophet, haven't you seen how I dealt with the nation called Ad? And the Holy Prophet, if it was literal, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam should have said, no, I haven't. They died several hundred years before any of us were born. What God is saying is, don't you know how I dealt with these people who, although they were very powerful on this earth, how I dealt with them when they disobeyed God. So see doesn't just mean that you see with your eyes. See means, or Roit doesn't just mean see with your own eyes. Roit means when you find out, by whatever means. And what means did the Holy Prophet Muhammad have available to him to see the moon? There was only one way, and that was to locate the moon with the naked eye. He couldn't say to them, ring Jodel Bank and find out when the next new moon is going to be. He couldn't say to them, look it up on the internet. He couldn't say to them, log on to www.moonsighting.org.uk, I think it is, and you'll find out when the new moon is. What else was the Prophet of Allah supposed to say, apart from when you see? There is no other way of finding out. You see, what the people forget is this, that people talk about Sharia and fiqh and so on. There is another principle of Sharia, and that is that an order or a command is only effective for so long as it's required. And we see this in our everyday lives. For example, if I take the example of this country, the law required every man in this country to go and practice archery for an hour after Sunday worship. And it was a criminal offense not to do so. How many people have practiced archery in recent times? How many people even know about this law? Has anyone been prosecuted and put in prison? No. And why? Because that law was effective only for as long as the need was there. In those days, you didn't have paid armies, you had volunteer armies, and if you're going to have volunteers, you needed to have volunteers with the skills readily to go into battle. You didn't have time to go and train them for 6 months. or retrain them for 6 months. So you had to have people who had these skills, who could readily be drafted, and off they would go to battle. But then that need ended. And because that need ended, that law became ineffective. That applies to all legal systems. And this is why I said that the pronouncements of Hazrat Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they were effective as long as the situation and the circumstances and the context existed in which those pronouncements were made. When things changed, then you need new legal rulings to deal with that situation. Now, the Holy Prophet also said, we are an unlettered people. We are an uneducated people. This is why sometimes the month is 29 days and sometimes it's 30 days. Actually, strictly, he actually raised his hand and he said sometimes the day is this long and sometimes the day is that long. Sorry, the month is this long and the month is that long, not the day. The question now is, are we still all unlettered people? Are we still all uneducated people? If we have access, even if we are not astronomers ourselves, if we have access to knowledge and sources of knowledge which we can use to determine exactly when the new moon is going to be, then the need for this ruling that you see the moon with your naked eye, that disappears. That is no longer needed because the context has changed. And the Holy Prophet himself has himself given the context that we do this. Why? Because we are not educated. We don't know science. We don't know mathematics. There was hardly anyone who could read and write in Arabia at that time. Many of the few who could had joined the Holy Prophet and become Muslims. You see, we have another difficulty. If we are going to take the hadith literally, that ro'yat means see with your naked eye, then what are we going to do with many verses of the Holy Quran? For example, in chapter 8, verse 60, the Holy Quran says that you should have strong horses ready at the border to deter the enemy. Now, the fact that Muslim countries don't have strong horses tied up at borders to deter the enemy, and instead have soldiers with machine guns and tanks and anti-tank missiles and so on, is it a violation of this verse of the Holy Quran? Obviously, an injunction was being given to the Muslims in the context and in the situation in which they found themselves. There was nothing else available for fast movement other than cavalry. So the Quran said that your cavalry should be ready to defend your country. When the circumstances change and cavalry is replaced by tanks and armored personnel carriers and so on, that this is what you have ready. And this is a mistake that Muslims make over and over again, and that is that they stick to literal translations of things rather than seeing what their significance is or what the wider message is that the Holy Quran is trying to give. It is obvious that the Holy Quran was revealed to a particular people in a particular country at a particular time in a particular language. And it had to have a message which those people could understand. Otherwise, Nauzubillah, people already said about the Holy Prophet Muhammad that he's a mad person. And if he said these things, maybe he knew them, we don't know. If he'd said these things, then that would have put a seal of proof on what this charge was against him. So these commandments, because they had to be for all the people, for all the time, they had to be given in a language, in words, which made sense at that time, and which as knowledge and information developed and improved, then they could be reinterpreted to apply at that time. There are the other verses that I recited to you. God wants ease for you and not hardship. That's interpreted simply to apply to the length of the fast. But we can also see that it makes it very difficult for people to start Ramadan on time, for people to take time off, to join their families and brothers and sisters in celebrating Eid, if they don't know until the day before that in the morning it's Ramadan or in the morning it's Eid. Take any profession. What is a surgeon who has a list in the morning supposed to do? Ring his hospital and say, sorry, I know I've got a list of 6 people that I'm supposed to operate on today, but unfortunately last night I heard that it's Eid today, so I won't be coming in. Naturally, the hospital's reply will be that you sit at home and you celebrate Eid for the rest of the year and don't bother to come in again. In the same way, take the example of a lawyer who has a hearing in the morning. If you tell him in the evening that it's Eid, that it's moon's been sighted and it's Eid in the morning, he doesn't have time to arrange an alternative. A solicitor won't have time to instruct a barrister. What is a teacher supposed to do? If he rings his school, what's going to happen to his classes for the whole day? So what we're doing is exactly against this injunction of the Holy Quran, that God wants to make things easy for you. But the next verse, I think 186 that I recited, and that is, God says, call on me, I'm close to you, I hear your call. Now, all of the information and knowledge that we have, we only have because God has granted that knowledge to us. If He had wanted to keep anything from us, then we would not be able to find it. If He wanted us to see moon with our own physical eyes and not be able to rely on calculation, we would not have been able to come up with a formula to use that calculation. We would not have been able to invent telescopes that tell us when the moon will appear. So this is also calling upon God. People just take it that it's in the sense that if we have problem or we have some sickness or whatever, then if we pray to God, then God says, I'm near, I will help you, I hear your prayer. But the fact that man gains any kind of knowledge in any subject, the fact that man invents anything in this world, is also a result of his prayers. Your desire in your heart to set out to achieve something is a prayer. As Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahab has said somewhere, that praying doesn't just mean that you sit down, you raise your hands and you pray to God, that something may happen. The effort you put into trying to achieve your objective is also a part of your prayer. And if you simply pray to God and don't make an effort yourself, then it means that your prayer is not complete, and incomplete prayers are not answered. So the fact that we always have this debate and so on and so forth is also a call from the hearts of the Muslims for God to provide us with some means by which we can with certainty predict when Ramadan is going to start and when Eid is going to be well in advance, so that we can arrange our affairs, so that as God promises that He doesn't want hardship for us, He wants ease for us, that the commandment in that verse applies. But all of this will only happen if we learn that we should not be narrowly and literally be interpreting and applying these things. I hope this is perhaps the last time that I speak on sighting of the moon and so on. 25 years ago, we decided that we were going to depend on calculations, and for 10 years, every year we checked whether we'd started Ramadan and celebrated Eid on the right day, and every year we had. So after that, I stopped checking. 10 years is enough. Had we been wrong in any year, we would have gone back, retraced our steps, and checked to see where we went wrong and what mistake it is that we made. And perhaps we should be proud of the fact that, as before, Ahmadis are perhaps 50 years, if not more, ahead of our brothers and sisters in exploiting the things that God has given us for the propagation of Islam and benefit of humanity.